Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you're listening to the VMware Community's Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 601. My name is Eric Nilsson, and I have no co-hosts with me. Both Corey and Matt are doing other things. Matt's traveling, and Corey's out on a personal day. So it's just me and my favorite guest on the whole planet here. We're going to be talking to Amanda Blevins. She's the Vice President and CTO of Americas in the office of the CTO. So we will talk to her. But before we do that, we will talk a little bit about the news and what's happening for VMware Explorer. So let's get to the color of the bay, the news, and all things in the intro, and then we'll get to Amanda in a second. So let's talk about what's happening. Oh, and what are we going to be talking about with Amanda? I forgot to say, multi-cloud. There was a Q1 briefing. Amanda was part of that briefing. It was really good. If you didn't get to catch it, you should go watch it. I did watch it, and I learned like 5 new things. So we're going to be talking about the multi-cloud briefing and what's new every quarter. I think this is a Q1 briefing. We're going to be talking about what's happening with multi-cloud. And I got to say, I learned some fun things about the stack. And so I think it's worth listening to our show and going back and checking out the multi-cloud briefing at the same time. Before we do that, let's get to the news. Well, what is the news? Obviously, Explore. It's all about Explore. We're getting ready to, talk about what sessions are going to be happening. So if you have a session idea, there is a way on the Explore page. Go to VMworld.com and go there. It'll redirect you to the Explore page on VMware, VMware.com/Explore. And there is a place you can find to submit ideas for papers. So they're not doing a call for papers this year. They're doing a ideas for papers section that you can go in and fill out a template. It'll go into the track owners, and the track owners will evaluate your idea. So that's I don't know the difference between a call for paper and idea for papers, but supposedly I'm told there is an idea section out there. You can go engage there to submit your ideas for papers. Maybe if an idea is accepted, they'll have somebody else do the paper. Not really sure how that's going to work out. At the same time, August 29th through September 5th, live in San Francisco, should be fun. I know they're going to have the Cube there. John. Don't remember his name. He's going to be there running the Cube. So he'll be there doing his interviews. Just remember the VMworld shows, very, very similar. We're going to have the vExpert party. We're going to have code experiences. We're going to have a developer section. So if you got a developer buddy that you want to bring along to the show, we're going to have some new experiences that are going to be focused around developer activities. Think about Spring One, think about Kubernetes, think about PowerShell, all wrapped up together. So we'll still have the VMware code sessions focused on data center automation, but we are going to have a little bit better track. And thank you, Graham, for telling me the Cube guy is John Furrier. So John Furrier is going to be there. The Cube's going to be there. We're going to have some interesting developer experiences there. And you want to come because we're going to have the VMware community booth. We've been working with Alistair. Alistair's going to bring V Brown Bag papers and sessions. He's already gotten call for sessions out there. I think we have 50 slots for interesting papers that are going to be presented at a theater. So if you've been to VMworld, we're going to be back. We have opened up the VMware campus. I've been to meetings on campus now. So, it is really, I had my first experience with meeting team members again in person that I've worked with for the last 2 years. And I got to say, it almost brought me to tears. So if you can imagine, I feel that just meeting 2 or 3 people that are on my team that we got together and had meetings in our old conference rooms and such. Think how good you're going to feel when you come together and hook up with all the community members that we've been doing stuff with on social and on Twitter and in podcasts, and you guys listening. I'm going to be there. I'm really excited about it. You might want to come to either US or Europe, and that's enough, I'm going to say. Obviously, VMworld Europe is in Spain. It is also already scheduled Europe, November 7th through the 10th. So excited about all that. I don't think I have any other major news. And again, Corey and Matt are out, so we'll skip that. So, color of the bay. Before we move to our guest, color of the bay. It is beautiful in California. It is nice, 70 degrees. It's sunny. It's coming into this wonderful spring summertime blend. The leaves are back out, and the color of the bay. It's just a nice, pretty green. Not over windy. The bay is only like 3 to 7 feet deep, depending on where you are in the bay. Up on the south end. So beautiful day here in Northern California, and we're probably out of the rainy season now. With that, I will get back to Amanda. So Amanda, this is a community podcast. The experts, a lot of our evangelists, social influencers, bloggers, all listen to the show. And we start out by saying, hey, introduce yourself. How long have you been at VMware? And we always ask, what's your career arc look like? How did you get here?
That's funny that you asked that. So again, Amanda Blevins, VP and CTO for the Americas. I've been at VMware 12 years. And it's funny that you asked that because I was just in St. Louis yesterday and gave a talk called SE to VP. And it was how I've gone from being a core SE, a core systems engineer at VMware, to the VP and CTO of the Americas. I get to deliver it again at the Denver VMUG next month. So definitely join us. I think it's May 17th. I think that's right. Denver VMUG folks, please correct me if that date's wrong, but I think it's correct. And so before that, I started working in IT about 26 years ago, so a very long time. So help desk, server admin, storage admin, technical architect, enterprise architect, worked for various industries, defense, manufacturing, technology, anywhere in between. Did data center migration, infrastructure rationalization, and just really enjoyed the last 12 years at VMware. So when I joined, it was about 5,000 people and 5 products, and now we're almost 40,000 people and hundreds of solutions. So it's been a great ride, and I look forward to quite a few more years enjoying seeing what happens with multi-cloud.
I want to somehow take credit for having you on the podcast because you're like one of us, right? You've come up through the data center. I ran a data center for a lot of years before I came to VMware, and it's like it's funny because we just have this history of a lot of people working out in the field and then coming to VMware, right? We recruit some of the best people to come in and help us because you're excited about it and you were usually a leader in your company, at the time, and then you come here. So we do this career arc conversation at the beginning of every podcast just to let people know who everybody is, and it is amazing. 8 of 10 people have the same, career arc, right? And the other thing I tell people is great to have, I don't really have a lot of respect, but, for people that haven't gone through that, because if you haven't gone through that, you haven't been at 2:00 in the morning when you wipe out servers and then you're the next 18 hours of your life turned into recovery of servers, right? And so you have to understand that to really get what this is all about, right? So that sounds great. And now you ended up. Have you been in the office of the CTO? Or how long have you ended up in the office of the CTO? And
so when
Americas mean? What does Americas mean? And then office.
Americas mean? So there are 3 Geo CTOs at VMware. Americas is this part of the world. Joe Bagley is responsible for EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And then Guru is responsible for APJ, so Asia Pacific, Japan. So basically anything in this part is my responsibility. And my job is to talk to our customers and partners, discuss our vision and strategy, how we can solve business problems, work with our different teams in R&D to influence product roadmap and innovation based on industry trends and customer needs. And then also, probably the best part of my job is co-innovation projects with our customers and partners. So solving problems that have never been solved before with VMware tech, other tech, and really pushing the envelope on what our solutions can do and working with those teams in R&D to make them solve those, to make our products solve those problems. So it's really fun. And, folks are trying to solve hard industry solutions. Definitely work with your VMware teams to let us know. And we'll probably see some folks from the office of the CTO come out.
Yeah, it's fun also because now I get how Raghu knows as much as he does because he probably talks to you guys, right? Because
Yeah.
you're out there and customers get this information to us, right? Somehow. And I'm like, how does Raghu learn this stuff? Like, because he always knows what the customer wants. I'm like, oh, he works with the Amandas of the world, right? Who
Yeah.
are actually out doing these type of things. And then they give you feedback and you probably get to see how to glue things together, where we have holes, where we have to do custom stuff to glue these type of solutions together, and then you can bring those back to the engineering teams and product teams, and help them turn that into something that's less gluey, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When we see these patterns over time, I'm working on edge solutions right now. And so I'm focused on manufacturing and oil and gas, but I have colleagues that are working on substation and, in vehicle, and we all have the same needs from a technology perspective to be able to solve these things. So being able to look at that bigger picture and say, yeah, it's great for this industry, but it's great for all these industries that we take this approach. So it's a good time.
Yeah, it's fast. I could just do a whole podcast on this subject, right? Which is just how these solutions get built and how they end up as product journeys for VMware, right? And I could just do a whole show on that, but we can't do a whole show on that. So thanks for sharing how you got here. That's super cool. That's super fun. We are going to talk on the show today about the briefing and the multi-cloud briefing, and let me jump here. I got to say, I was talking to you before we started the show. Every time I hear multi-cloud, I start to understand it more and more. So this feels like NSX back in the day where people would talk about NSX and Nucera, and I'd be like, what? How does that? I'm not a network admin. I've never been a network admin. My brother-in-law's a network admin, and when he talks, I don't understand any of it, right? But then over time, you start to understand it. I feel like multi-cloud is the same way. Every time I hear a little bit more about multi-cloud, it starts to ring true. So maybe we could talk a little bit about like the multi-cloud briefings. We are doing these briefings on a regular basis. What's that about?
Yeah, what is it about? So one, like cloud is hard. Just let's put it out there. Like it is very, very difficult, right? And so I like to talk about cloud from the sense that you have a cloud if you have certain characteristics according to NIST. So self-service, broad network access, rapid elasticity, resource pooling, and metering. So if you consume cloud as a service from public cloud providers like AWS or Azure or GCP, you are consuming clouds. You have one of those same characteristics. You might have workloads at the edge where you want to be able to manage them in the same way. And so multi-cloud means that now I'm using multiple clouds. I'm running workloads in multiple clouds. However, I want to do it efficiently, because if I just use them individually, then I have 3 or 4 different tool sets. I have 3 or 4 different teams, and operationally that just doesn't scale and can cause more security issues. So multi-cloud itself is focused on using multiple clouds in the most operationally and most secure way, most operationally efficient and most secure way across those environments. So it's about optionality and choice. And so our VMware multi-cloud briefings talk about these subjects, but then also share, what does VMware have in our cross-cloud portfolio to help folks run workloads where they choose, whether it's on a VMware platform or not, and have those operational efficiencies and security and just better visibility and performance of all of their workloads.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting because I watched quite a bit of it. And Joel, we opened with this guy Joel, which I think it works for VMware now, but he was a pilot, and I think it was a military pilot at some point. And he talks about the gauges and how complex fighters have become, right? And you can't take one fighter to another fighter. If you hear about the war and they're trying to share fighters, but like the reality is they're so complex now, you just can't take a pilot and put them in one plane to the next plane. It takes years of training to understand. And then he takes us through the complexity of IT and how that has become, the biggest challenge of deploying modern solutions is the complexity. So I thought he was really interesting to listen to, right? And then as he takes us into the customers, I think Victoria took us into some customers. There've been a couple, and the customers are actually interesting because they're real live customers, doing the multi-cloud solutions, usually based on Tanzu, right? Like one of them said Tanzu is like the new operating system for the cloud in a sense of, but then just like we had to virtualize, the operating system layer, if you have multi-cloud, you almost have to virtualize the Tanzu layers in order to manage, that, to abstract away the dependencies across these multi-cloud environments. So it is interesting. Every time I've heard one of these briefings, I pull a little bit more out of what's in my head on what multi-cloud really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. To be able to use Kubernetes is great because you have modern applications. You can easily scale them, and then they're portable because containers are that unit that can run in any environment, regardless of what the underlying infrastructure is. But as soon as you spin up Kubernetes with AKS or EKS or GKE or you're using Tanzu Kubernetes grid on-prem or in a cloud or at the edge, now all of a sudden you have all these different, Kubernetes sprawl, just like you had server sprawl and virtual machine sprawl. It's the same thing. So with Tanzu Mission Control, we only have that single point where you're able to deploy and configure and manage and secure these different Kubernetes clusters, regardless of the underlying infrastructure of the service is definitely the way to go.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to try to calm down because I feel like I'm sounding like a marketing guy, right? Like all the time here, like, because I'm excited because I watched it and I finally it started to click for me, like just like Sierra and NSX started to click, and I went, oh, okay, now I'm starting to understand this, right? One of the things when I got to your section, I thought was fun was the layer of abstraction and the history. You start with assembly machine code. Do you have that memorized? Can you take us through that little stack? What was the 5 things that you had historically where we went from raw iron and assembly up? Could you?
I don't know if I have it memorized, but it was something like, we wrote assembly for machine code, and then, we had compilers to be able to do better there. And then we had bare metal, and we moved to a hypervisor and virtualization. Now we've gone from, this installing operating systems on virtual machines, which are still important. We still do a lot of. And now we're saying, hey, let's abstract that operating system and those underlying requirements away into containers. And that's where Kubernetes comes in to be able to orchestrate that. And now we have these different cloud services where it might be infrastructure services or application services, such as serverless or machine services or anything else out there. And so now you need to abstract to different layers, right? We have the infrastructure layer to abstract. We have the security layer. We have the application layer and the end user layer. So there is so much out there that we need to run and manage for workloads today to run our businesses that we have to break them up into these different layers so we can make strategic, informed decisions about how we want to handle that.
All right. So I started to get cloud, and because I'll rewind a little bit here. Like when we went to cloud, we had vCloud Air. That was a mess, right? Like that was bad code, bad everything, bad strategy. Then we hooked up with AWS, right? And the next thing you know, we have a good strategy, which is we're building a highway. I feel like I'm building highway to the Keys or something, right? Where we can take people, and we're VMware. We got all 1,000 enterprise Fortune 1,000 running various workloads under vSphere and then we build a highway to the island. But I was starting to question whether just everybody's going to drive down to the island and never come back, right? Because it's pretty down in Key West, and you got the sunsets, and like, are we actually creating value for VMware by building a highway to move everybody to AWS? But then as I began to learn, you start to realize that customers don't want to just go to the island. They love going to the island, but then they have a condo down there, and maybe they even have a boat slip, but they want to come back. They still got a lot of data center up on the mainland, right? And so I started to understand the bidirectionality of it, right? And what we offered in order for customers to migrate or get to the island thing breaks down here now, but I started to understand what we offer, right? In allowing you to work on a single cloud, right? And start to understand the value to that. Now I look at the multi-cloud thing and I go, I don't know. Anybody in the VMUGs got multi-cloud yet? I mean, I went to VMUG Toronto before the pandemic. I was doing a road show for a little while, and I'd ask people like, how many of you guys have cloud? And nobody raised their hand, right? Like there were 200 people in the room and like 2 people raised their hand. So I guess you're on the VMUG circuit these days, right? Like, how far away are actually people from really experiencing the challenges to multi-cloud? Is this like a 3-year journey for them? What's your sense of us offering now? There's a vision. They have problems. You're experiencing those problems. You're gluing things together. How far are people on that journey?
So I've been having this conversation a lot in VMUGs, and also, I talk with hundreds of customers and partners a year. And if we think back about 5 years, everybody started to say, I'm going to move all of my workloads to public clouds, or they would say to cloud. They wouldn't categorize, or they wouldn't caveat it with public cloud. But I like to say that back to my, definition with NIST or characteristics.
Yeah, I'll just throw in, Carl Eschenbach came in a private meeting with like 15 of us executives at the time. I wasn't really executive. Somehow I ended up in this meeting. And he's like, yeah, I'm not selling any more enterprise licenses anymore. I think I got to quit because I don't know how I'm ever going to make our quotas because everybody wants to go to AWS. So it is true. Back in that moment, everybody was like, we're going. Yeah.
They're like, oh, that solves everything. And it doesn't, right? Because now the time has passed and people now have workloads running up in public clouds and using SaaS services, et cetera. It was an experiment. It was a proof of concept. It was individual teams or a line of business doing it without IT. And so there weren't a lot of intentional full multi-cloud strategies back then. There was, hey, we're going to try stuff out in AWS. We're going to try it in Azure. Or the idea that, I'm going to refactor my 1,000 applications and be done in a few years. Absolutely not. Like, we've all learned that is not successful now. So what I like to ask folks is, what is your definition of success? What is your measurement of success? Some people just don't want to manage data centers anymore. So data center evac, get all my virtual machines out of this building into somebody else's data center like AWS or Azure GCP. You're using VMware Cloud on AWS or Azure, VMware solution or something else, like that's perfect for that. Right. Some people say, I want to refactor all my applications and get them in public cloud. Well, I have bad news that it takes about 2 years in my experience to refactor an application properly and have it run as a distributed application in the public cloud. And we just don't have time. We're all going to retire before that's done, right? So then there are the folks that, especially in financial services recently, they need to mitigate their risk. And one of the ways that the regulatory requirement says you can mitigate risk is by running workloads in multiple clouds. And so that I think that is an actual use case, and that could be a measurement of success.
That's an interesting concept.
Yes.
I had never realized that. That's fascinating because when you run your own data centers, you can mitigate risk by saying, well, we got one in California and we got one in, the Eastern Seaboard somewhere. And so that's easy to say. And, we're managing that. And by the way, you can put me in jail if I screw this up because I run it. Right. And so that's okay. But the minute you go to a cloud, I guess AWS could sell me on a mitigation strategy, right? Or a risk diversification model. But then do you really trust one vendor? And you're going to throw me in jail if that vendor messes up. No, I think I'd rather have a handful of vendors here, right?
Yeah. I mean, infrastructure always goes down. So whether it's on-prem or in a public cloud, there are going to be outages. So be able to build those applications properly to be able to handle those situations is great. And then we have other folks that want to use cloud for BCDR. Something bad happened over here. I want to bring it up online in somebody else's data center. Great. I don't have to pay for those resources all the time. I just use them when I need them. And then we have burst capacity. So really go back and say, we might have had a plan. Maybe, we had a business plan and ROI 2 to 5 years ago. I highly encourage folks to look at that plan and see if it was successful, if you're meeting the ROI you expected. Things have changed, right? Technology has changed. People have realized that this is very difficult. So review that and say, is this the right plan to continue to follow? Do we meet our ROI? Should we be doing it differently? Because I find a lot of executive conversations now are around, let's redefine what success is for us.
Yeah, I could definitely understand that. And I had a concept, but I don't remember what it is. So we'll just move on. I had a great thought around that, but it'll hit me in a second.
It'll come back later.
It'll come back. It'll come back to me. So our message, so we definitely had a go to the cloud, right? put it on top of vSphere, stay on vSphere. I remember what it is. It came back to me now. Okay. So when you said something that keyed me, which is when I'm looking at my project budget, right? And we run, services in the cloud, we have AWS instances, and I'm looking at what to invest in next year. There are these things that I just go, we should fix that. We're being charged $100K a year to have this service running, but that's not a big major objective, right? Like we can just leave that running and pay the money and it'll be there. And if we look at what we can invest in, that's going to move the needle and move us forward. So I get a bunch of these things that are running there. They're fine. And I can just leave them there. We need them, but I don't need to fix them. And that's where grabbing an instance of AWS for vSphere, put it in the cloud and just let it sit there and it runs. I don't have to touch it. I don't have to migrate it. I don't have to refactor it into Kubernetes. I could just have that application, keep it running. And so we've done a good job in enabling that to transition if I want to turn off my local data center and put it in AWS, or in my case, I hate my IT. So we spin up instances of AWS and we move it there and we tell IT, oh, we don't need you anymore. Sorry. That's not true really, but I tell that a little bit funny, tongue in cheek. So the idea now that we all get comfortable with spreading that workload across multiple clouds without the refactoring, right? Because this is all about refactoring, right? And so I guess my question, it's just a comment. It's like, yeah, I see this. This makes sense. I don't have to refactor a certain amount of workload. And then I don't probably need to, manage that across multiple clouds because I don't need to. But then I do have new workloads that I'm refactoring. I'm building new Kubernetes apps for, and therefore I might want to take advantage of different services that are offered in different clouds, but then have a common infrastructure framework that this all layers on, so that whether I'm running my old app on vSphere or I'm running Tanzu on vSphere or I'm running Tanzu native, I can manage all of these components across one cloud. But then Amazon does get me angry sometimes, mostly around billing. So allowing me to go look at multiple clouds and then looking at billing options, right? And usage options and API options, obviously, really is valuable. But having that common framework across all of them allows me to manage it and allows me to get my head around not having to refactor an app for one cloud or another cloud. I can just do it across Tanzu, across multiple clouds, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So then there's this concept called DevSecOps, Developer Security Operations, and there are tools that go along with it. I'll touch on that in a bit. But it's really that operating model. It's getting the developer teams to work closely with the security teams and the operations teams, and everybody understand what that goal is and what success looks like and how these applications should be deployed and secured and managed and observed and all these things. And so when you do DevSecOps, you have these, software pipelines, these CI/CD pipelines. And so you've basically automated everything: the infrastructure, the application deployments, the security, the firewall rules, whatever you need for your application to run. And so when you set up these CI/CD pipelines, if you use the tools that are available native in a certain public cloud provider, it works great for that public cloud provider. But as soon as you want to run those workloads in a different public cloud, then you have to use different tools. You have to, recreate your pipelines. You have to learn to use new services, right? And so being able to have something that's agnostic and abstracting, like Tanzu application platform, like using vRealize automation, having those cloud agnostic blueprints, really reduces the work that you need to do, but also gives you that optionality and choice across those different clouds.
Okay, so that does hint another thing, and I've remembered it, so I didn't forget it this time.
Nice.
Which is the admins themselves, right? And if I started to tease apart groups, when I went to go to VMUGs and talk to people, they're like, yeah, there is a cloud group and a cloud team, and there's a traditional IT team, which used to be storage and network and work and compute. Now it's kind of more all lumped together. Do you see some of those bridges starting to when we got into NSX, I remember it was like the network admins were like their own crowd, leave them alone. They didn't even want to talk to us. They were Cisco guys or whoever. They just VMware, no way, right? Yeah. And I kind of look at the cloud admin group, which fundamentally was AWS. Now it's
Right.
AWS Azure and Google, and now there's actually Alibaba. So it's getting crazier.
Yeah.
Are we seeing crossover now? I know dev, then you have the DevOps stuff that comes in, which kind of works with the cloud people fairly well. When we started with NSX, we didn't really have traction there, right? But over time, we got traction with the network admins. Those things all came together.
Yeah.
I would assume that the multi-cloud admin function, right, or the cloud teams, all of this, and the developer teams and the DevOps and security that's now called dev. What is it?
Sec for security, SEC.
DevOps, yes.
Yeah.
This is a function of, in even the retitling of the security teams coming into cloud, the developer, what I would call as a build engineer, right? Now calling a DevOps engineer, which is now operation. I see all this coming together much the way I saw NSX and storage come together from an admin perspective altogether. And so I would assume maybe multi-cloud will kind of be a collection, and the lines between your cloud and your data center and admins and networks will maybe be blurred in the same manner that the NSX got the network function adminning through one group, right?
Yeah. And I think people are just starting to realize that they need to do that. And there's a couple reasons. So one is just they understand how much more expensive it is to have different teams and different tools, and that it's not efficient from that cost or performance standpoint. The other reason is that if you look at companies that announce, we're going to go all in on this public cloud environment, it's going to be our strategic cloud. And then the next line in the article or the executive you're talking to is, and we have 400 open positions to be able to make this happen, right? So we've had this great resignation, people finding different jobs. And when I talk to a lot of different companies, it is almost impossible for them to find the people that they think that they need with AWS certs or Azure certs or GCP or knowing these newer technologies. And while they've been siloing off the traditional IT team, the folks that have had this knowledge for decades about how everything works, how everything is connected, to learn multiple generations of technologies already. And so these organizations that are trying to silo the different teams from different cloud providers or the cloud and the traditional team are not doing themselves any favors, because they can't hire the resources they think they need because they don't exist, because there's so many open positions. But two, these are very smart, capable people that have been able to evolve with the times and know different types of technology. And if these two teams come together and become one, then we're not doing the same job 2 or 3 different times. We're doing, we're using the same tool sets across different clouds, and we have people learning similar technology. Networking in AWS, it might be different, but it's not that much different than networking on-prem, et cetera, et cetera. So we really want to see these folks that have been isolating their teams in different silos of, here's my on-prem virtualization team, and here's my AWS team, here's my Azure team. Let's not do that anymore. One, there's just not enough folks to do it. But two, we need to be able to combine the teams so they can share that knowledge and those capabilities, because people that companies that are quote unquote born in the cloud, or people that have only used public cloud environments, don't have that infrastructure knowledge that people who have been working in the industry for many years on-prem do. So I really encourage folks to not have those siloed ways and bring together their teams to get the most efficiencies for the company, and to bring in all those smart folks that have been running the business for a long time.
Yeah, and I'll throw in that. Don't worry, all the vSphere people take over anyway, right? Like, give us time, we'll own it all, right? Like, that's one thing that I'd say VMware has done amazingly well, is protect the investment of the IT administrator, because we've climbed into new spaces, right? And you can argue that we want the cloud admin to learn about our stuff, right? And but the reality is we also just want our people to make more money and grab a bigger chunk of how we do computing and staying relevant in that, right? And as long as it's not artificial, right? Like,
Right.
we could try to sell them something that's not real, that nobody really wants, right? Like a multi-cloud. Does anybody really want this, or is this just VMware trying to stay in business, right? But the reality is that I think that this is real. It is one of these problem sets that everybody's going to come. It's interesting, the labor shortage thing. I hadn't heard that before, right? So that's, I hear about it in VMware. I hear about, the great resignation, that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
it was interesting that you're experiencing that as you listen to customers experience the need for cloud capable talent. And as we enabled cloud, I'll stop on that and just say that I watched a little bit of your session. I would say everybody go to blogs.vmware.com/multi-cloud and just look for the cloud briefing. Definitely really high quality, good, fun to listen to, fun to watch. The pilot was really cool. I liked your session in particular. You actually had a couple of other people on, right, to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about the last bit of your session.
With the demos?
Yeah, with the demos. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so it's one thing to watch somebody talk and to say, oh, Amanda says that this can happen, but it's more important to be able to see it and make sure that folks can visualize it, so that they know that it's possible with our technology. And if you don't have VMware Cloud and AWS, you don't have vRealize automation, and you want to actually build it out yourself, I encourage everyone to go to our hands-on labs or to talk to their VMware team and that sort of thing, because it just shows that we've been able to do this for a long time. And I think people are remembering or realizing that we can. And so, there's different multi-cloud services from different companies. But VMware is one of the only companies, if not the only company, that has multi-cloud services across all those layers that I spoke about before.
Right. And that's I was trying to remember when I led you into that. But
Yeah.
It was the vRealize piece that I thought I wanted to call out and shout out, because it's like, vRealize, was for data center automation. Everybody's trying to. Then it was like, well, you can do some cloud automation, and now they're showing you how you can do multi-cloud automation as well, right? So it is one of those investments in our own product set to get you to the point where you can go to be a conversationalist in the architecture around, this is what we can do to do multi-cloud because it's vRealize automation. We already use this on-prem as it is. So that was actually pretty interesting to see that in that segment, right?
Absolutely. And vRealize automation is also available as a SaaS solution too. So folks don't even need to deploy it on-prem. You can just start consuming it and set that up, and it doesn't take very long. I did a similar demo, building a VMworld demo, not last year, but the year before. And I think I had the demo built in just a few hours on a Sunday. So it's a pretty, straightforward technology to use.
Right. So you mentioned labs and you mentioned VMUG. So we'll do VMUG for a second, then we'll go to labs, okay. This is the segment of the program. The last 15 minutes, I do an hour thing. The last 15 minutes, we'd like to talk about like where people can go learn things. And, so you have a hands-on labs. You have obviously VMware Explore that's going to be coming up. And so there's going to be a lot of content, but let's talk about what you're talking about at VMUG. So you have a session. How do you get a session at VMUG? How do you get on that circuit? I know that I did it with the VMUG at Teresa Strait and these people. Like, I'm wondering what the process is for you being a speaker at VMUG these days. And then secondly, what are you talking about when you go there?
So it was really cool when I went to the St. Louis VMUG yesterday, because Brad, who's the CEO of VMUG, was there, and he asked the question of the audience. And he asked the question of the audience and said, how many people is this their first VMUG? And a number of people in the room raised their hands, and I thought that was really neat. And then the VMUG leaders get up on stage and they intro the day and they talk about the different speakers and topics. And there's, like a mini like vendor hall where everybody has their booths and you can go see demos and talk to people and stuff. So they talked about that. But really, the VMUG community is awesome because they're so welcoming. They want people to have their first presentation experience at VMUG. In fact, VMUG was my first VMware public presentation as well when I was an SE 12 years ago. And so, that's where I got started, and it's such a welcoming community. So when folks are new to VMUG, it's not like you have to put in your time. before you can present,
Right.
before you can have little sessions, little brown bag sessions if you want, or a whole session. The VMware community, they want folks to come in, to be able to learn, absorb, create their own networks and communities and people to interact and learn from. But also they want to hear from everyone and their experiences. So I believe there's a way to submit sessions on a VMware website, but also, learn who your local VMware leaders are and reach out to them and say, hey, I'm new and I'd love to be a part of this. And I have some ideas for some presentations, and I'm quite sure they'll be very welcoming and support you in getting that to happen.
So you just picked St. Louis and said, all right, I think I'm going to go to St. Louis and do it. I didn't ask where you're actually out of. Maybe you live in St. Louis.
No, I live in Colorado. So it's just a couple-hour flight, but they reached out to me. They're like, hey, Amanda, can you come present? I was like, yes, I'd love to come present. And then living in Colorado, I get to do the Denver one, but I've been able to present at VMUGs.
What did you present?
Oh, so I presented personally on my career. So I'll present, there's a talk that I'm known for called Achieving Happiness, Building Your Brand in Your Career. Because I was just recently promoted to VP and CTO for the Americas, this presentation was about my path for the last 12 years. How I've gotten to where I am today. I'll talk about multi-cloud, all sorts of things. So
this explains a lot, because I thought your opening was one of the best openings I'd ever heard on the career arc. And I'm like, you're like ticking it off. We're like, yeah, I did this. I'm like, oh, you have a presentation on it. I got it.
Yes. I put a lot of effort into it. Yeah.
I was like, get the award for the best career arc description I'd ever heard of. Right? Like, but that makes sense. All right, that's a cool presentation, right? So then some people reach out to you and do that. I know that when I went on the VMUG circuit a few years ago, I just reached out to the VMUG Brad and said, hey, we want to do some, have this Raspberry Pi code, ESX on Raspberry Pi, kind of fun stuff. Lamb. I want to go give away sensors and just hang out at the community and go do that. And had a lot of fun. It's always fun to go engage with everybody in the field. And it is interesting that you call out the raise your hand thing. Like every time I go to VMUG, those beginning sessions where you'd say, raise your hand if you've done this or done that. Like it is just so enlightening for somebody who lives in California that doesn't get out enough to the rest of the world to just see where everybody, and it's interesting, every region, every VMUG is different, right? Like there are different, industries. They're far enough along in their journeys of different technology. It's just, you always go, oh, that's fascinating. I would have never known that. So that's cool. Do you know if there's, multi-cloud stuff going on? Are we getting multi-cloud sessions out to the VMUGs? I know Kit, used to be on a circuit for, various talks. I haven't paid attention to do we have any evangelists out talking multi-cloud these days?
Yeah, there was Phoebe Kim, who's a manager on the multi-cloud solutions team, was at St. Louis VMUG yesterday, and she had a session on multi-cloud, so a practitioner's session. So folks like myself and Kit and Joe and Chris Wolf and Guru, we can talk about multi-cloud and the vision and the strategy and where the industry is, et cetera. But there's so many, great solution architects and SEs and technical leaders at VMware. They're available to also have those practitioner sessions so people can see what it looks like hands-on and what's possible today and, what's coming up in the future.
This is awesome, Amanda. I am in awe, right? Like we'd like to have Kit come on. Kit is a regular guest to the community podcast, once a year or whatever. We'll have him come on and talk about stuff, VMworld, whatever. But it's great to meet you, because oh my God, I'm like, you could be a replacement to Kit, right? Like, because Kit's
don't tell him that. No, he's my boss's boss. Kit is amazing.
Right. It's like, it's hard to get him now, or it's not that it's hard to get him, because I know Raghu. I've been here forever, 15 years. Raghu hired me here, so I can send all these guys mail. They all know me. They've all been on the show, given over the years. But I don't bother them because they're busy, right? Like, but you're not busy. Heck, I Amanda all the time, right? So the hands-on labs, we talked about hands-on labs, or you mentioned them. In multi-cloud, I would assume that they're kind of labs that are associated with the technology, so vRealize automation, and then maybe there's a segment that talks about how to deal with multi-cloud, Carbon Black, cloud SaaS service, that kind of stuff. How does that get bundled up and delivered to people?
Yeah, so when I first started VMware, it was like a rite of passage to work in the hands-on lab. So 12 years ago, back then, we didn't have, our amazing HOL environment that's on, year-round and a cloud service and that sort of thing. So we'd have people go out and, a couple days before VMworld, they'd be setting up the server racks and getting all connected. And then we'd be putting on these labs that we designed a few months ago and been working on putting together. But then we'd have like alpha code of Horizon that we'd have to rewrite in the middle of the night before the labs opened. And so now, we've evolved so much now that cloud is available and we can keep them up all year round. But when I was a lab captain a couple of years later, it was the first time we had vRealize Log Insight. And so I was a lab captain for that. And one of my key tenets was making sure that you just don't understand what the VMware product or service is. You understand how it is used in the real world, like how to apply it to your job and what you do today. So we absolutely have labs where we want to show the different technologies VMware has, but these labs are also written away so people can see what they should be doing or what they could be doing with solutions from VMware to make their lives easier and have better uptime and performance and security for their company's applications and workloads.
I know on our side, I'll just do a shout out to Pablo Roach because he did a lot of marketing for HOL, right? And it was fun. And then I'm not sure what happened. He left. I don't know if he got quitted or whether he just moved on, or I don't know. But now I've heard he's working at AWS. So I'm like, oh, Pablo, you're out there. Darn, you should come. You should loop back. But yeah, a lot of history there. Kind of cool that you're a lab captain as well, right? So. Yeah. It's just an amazing hire for you to be a VP in the CTO office. It's like, not only are you one of us, but you're like really one of us plus extra lab with that's just awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. We're coming up to the top of the hour. We only have 5 more minutes. If you've listened all the way to the end, which I know many of you have, I just got to say thanks for that. If you want to look at what Amanda looks like, you can go to youtube.com/vbarbecue, BARBECUE. There's multiple ways to spell barbecue these days. And we can, you can see what we look like. We put all the live streams up there. You can see Amanda here, myself, and other community members. So go to Barbecue, and you can always give me a like and a follow if you want to get us up to 1,000 people so we can monetize it. Not that I'm going to ever do that because we don't have that many people want to watch video, but go check us out and see what Amanda looks like. Amanda, it is 5 minutes to lunchtime now, so we kind of loop back through and ask each of our guests, so you said you were in Colorado. Is that do they have barbecue in Colorado? I think that's like a big vegetarian state, right? You don't really have any cattle there, right?
We have all sorts of cattle. I'm watching cattle right now as we're doing this podcast. I live around a bunch of ranches, and we also do a lot of good buffalo. So, but I would not say Colorado is a good barbecue state. There's a lot of contention of so being in St. Louis the last couple of days, right. I did when I flew in. There was one place that I really liked, but there was one that had better ratings on Google, so I wanted to try it out, called Pappy's. It was good. It wasn't for me because it was too much vinegar in it. So the place that I really like in St. Louis is called Sugar Fire, and I like the sweet sauces. I like the sweet cornbread, so that's why that style is good for me. And last year I went to a place in Nashville called Jack Hawthorne's. So good too. So that's my style of barbecue, that sweet sauce, the I don't know, just that rich meat, and then having that cornbread to go along with, and some sweet tea. We don't really do sweet tea in Colorado either. So it's nice to be able to travel outside the state and enjoy that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the saucy sweet. So I love sauces. So for me, the barbecue, it's about the sauces and the sugary sauces. So, and then Colorado, I just tongue in cheek because obviously Colorado is a cattle state, right? Yeah. And it's also a horse state, and they have the Western Final Rodeo. I think in Denver, I've been. Yeah. It's a lot of fun, right? To go to. It's like I tend to get to a couple rodeos now and then, and I've been to. I was in Denver, and they had a sign up going the National Rodeo or whatever, the Western region or whatever. Go there, a lot of fun. lot of fun to watch that. If you ever get a chance in Colorado, go to rodeo. You can go do that.
Yeah, right now we have our guy out there filing down the hooves of our horses and the goats. So
There
we
you
got
go.
a little ranch ourselves. He's out there doing the work right now.
That's what if I had to have any livestock in my backyard, I have bees, but I said the next one I get, if I were going to get it, is to get goats, because goats are just so much fun to watch and,
They are fun.
and play with.
Fun. They're like dogs. They want to play and hang out. So it's a good time.
Yeah. They do. Right. Amanda Blevins, we always end with thanks for being on the show. What's your Twitter handle? People want to follow you.
It's Amanda Blev. So just my first name and the first 4 letters of my last name.
At AMANDABLE, right? First
V.
3 letters.
Yeah.
V.
Yeah,
BLEV, Blev, Amanda Blev at
Yeah.
Amanda Blev. Go give her a follow, guys. This could be fun to follow along. We're going to definitely have you back, Amanda, if you will come, because you're doing a lot of cool stuff, and love to have a kit replacement, right? We got one. Thanks a lot for coming. This has been fun. We'll be back again next week, as always. Until then, go get some good barbecue and have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, Eric. Take care, everyone.